Okay, nice, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah,
Nice to see you.
nice to see you. Yeah,
Yeah. It must be cold, no?
yeah. No, it's not just started. It's unusually warm here, 16 degrees centigrade.
Oh, I see. Global warming is.
I don't know. Once in a way, it happens. I think we get warmer weather in the winter. Lasts for a few 4 days, 4 5 days.
Okay, okay, sure. So your slides are now visible, okay?
Okay.
You
Okay,
can
what I
share
would
the
like
slide.
to talk to you about the COP26. Dr. Ramchandra suggested to me that I should talk something about the climate change initiatives. So I have made some efforts to collate some of the activities that are going on in Canada, particularly Canada's road to net zero emissions by 2050. The Prime Minister of Canada and the delegation from Canada agreed that they would bring net zero emissions by 2050. And there are several initiatives that are going on in Canada in relation to the climate change initiatives. Some of them are good news, some of them are not so good news. I would like to share some of those things with you. May I have the next slide? You probably know, all of you have read or made efforts to understand what climate change really means. I think all of us have been experiencing, if not experiencing directly or indirectly at least, and also observing some of the things that are happening the world over. Melting of the glaciers, extreme weather events that you have seen recently in British Columbia and other places, and the impact on the ecosystems. And that has been clearly acknowledged by the international community, as stated by the Secretary General of the United Nations as a preamble to the COP26 meeting in Glasgow, Scotland. Next one, please. And as you could see here, greenhouse gas emissions contributions, which are given in a sort of broader perspective, the contributions that are taking place. And the main contributions are coming from China, United States, and to some extent from India and the European Union. And there is a concerted effort to bring these greenhouse gas emissions, which of course includes carbon dioxide, methane, and the nitrous gases. So may I have the next slide, please? So as you've seen over the years, the carbon dioxide concentration, which has been recorded quite diligently since, at least since 1985, ever since the topic of climate change became a serious issue. As you could see, it has been continuously increasing and unabated, because as the economic development and growth, not only in developing countries, but also in the emerging economies, such as India and China, has contributed quite a bit into the rising of the carbon dioxide concentrations. Next one, please. So along with the carbon dioxide, as I mentioned, the concentrations of methane and nitrous, this one is also important. And as you could see in this slide, I have tried to give some numbers. So overall, CO2 is responsible for around 66% of the warming of the world, with methane and other nitrous oxides contributing to the remainder. May I have the next one, please? So if you look at the global seasonal cycle anomaly, in terms of the temperature, as predicted by global models, the black line is the one which shows the anomaly, that is the temperature difference. It's given here. As you could see, it is continuously going up seasonally year after year. The black line is this recently, that is in 2021. So certainly there is no question that the global temperature is on the rise. And in spite of the efforts that are being done to reduce the greenhouse gases. Next time, please. Next one, please. So the same thing, which is represented in a different way based on global mean temperature differences between 1850 and 1900. And it is continuously rising. I think the COP mission in Glasgow was to, or in fact, I should say the Paris Agreement of 6-7 years ago was to minimize, bring the net zero emissions to limit the temperature rise no more than 1.5 degrees centigrade. So now we are closely almost inching up to that level, and there is sincere efforts, and at least in my many countries of the world, international organizations to attain net zero emissions as soon as possible, at least towards the end of this century. And the next place, please. Same thing, as you could see, temperature around the world continue to soar following the record hot meteorological summer of the world, particularly since 1880 to 2021. You could see the blue line is all, of course, below the 0 degrees centigrade, and then the temperature keep rising as it proceeded from 1940 onwards to 2021. Next one, please. Climate changing has seen a number of impacts. Some of them appears to be qualitative at this time, at least as they noticed it in the last 15, 20 years. There have been several aspects of it which can be attributed purely for seasonal variations in the weather system. And therefore, there is always this confusion to attribute any changes that have taken place in the system, whether it is due to the climate change impact or whether it is due to the seasonal variations which are generally occur. But there is a systematic change that is taking place in the last 20 or 25 years in several aspects of the climate change. And this is one of them, that the climate change is showing the Earth's brightness levels. This is on a much larger scale, but there are several on a regional or even continental scales, which you will see some of them now. May I have the next one, please? Have started noticing already the impact of climate change in the sense that the glacier melting is taking place both in the Antarctic as well as in the Arctic. This is a northern Skuld glacier in the Norwegian archipelago, the north of Iceland. And a similar type of things have been also observed in the glaciers north of Canada, because we are also in the northern hemisphere, in the northern latitudes. And our climatic influence not only depends on the equatorial systems as well as from the Arctic systems. Therefore, the climate change impact, where these glaciers never melted. And in some of the glaciers, I think they've already started seeing, instead of snowfall, rain. So there is certainly an impact of the rise in temperatures on the glaciers. Thank you. Next one. You can see a similar type of thing in the northern hemisphere, north of Canada, northern latitudes, where the ice is supposed to be a blanket of ice has started breaking. This is the Lake Superior's largest freshwater lake in the world, as some of you probably know about it. May I have the next one, please? Not only these kind of impacts, there is also a considerable observation available in terms of the Gulf Stream, the equatorial current, which goes from the equatorial regions to the northern latitudes, the famous Gulf Stream, which has been observed to be inching closer and closer to the coastline. And there, of course, with its consequences, has regional climatic effects that we see in the eastern seaboard in the northern in North America, not only in United States, of course, starting from the Florida Keys all the way up to the Newfoundland in one of the Canadian provinces. So may I have the next one, please? The devastating effect of the climate change is quite familiar to you. Some of you, some may attribute this one to the seasonal cycle. We have at least many atmospheric scientists as well as the geophysical scientists have started observing these things, that there is an unpredictable monsoon, both in terms of the intensity as well as in the seasonal shifting. What used to be taking place, most of you are probably familiar, sometime in the middle of June or end of June towards this one, it is gradually shifting in time, as well as, of course, the intensity is also increasing at the same time. And of course, as a consequence, all this regional the impact of the climate storms and hurricanes and those type of things causing flooding in various coastal regions. And there are two questions that we have to raise. Not only the impact of these floodings have to be this one, but also these urban environments, the infrastructure is not really adaptable to these type of extreme events. And this is nothing new in India, but of course, we have seen that in India many, many times. And it has become quite clear to us also in Canada, which when we are experienced a similar type of catastrophic climatic event, which brought flooding to many areas in British Columbia and the west coast of Canada, which I will show it to you later. Thank you. Next one, please. Climate change, and as I mentioned, there's the delayed monsoon, the shifting of the monsoon, as well as the next one, please. Next one. Some of this information, many of you have probably have come across, have read. I happen to get to keep a watch on these type of things as a hobby. And as all of you know, Kaveri is one of the lifeline of in southern India. Karnataka and Tamil Nadu depends on it, and there's a lot of controversies about the sharing of the waters, as you see. But in addition to that, I think we are imposed with this the deficit in the river, what they call the normal northeast monsoon is replaced by storms during the season, which has caused considerable havoc, particularly in Tamil Nadu, as you have seen in the last few weeks. The next one, please. Climate change and the coastal sea level rise. And of course, one of the implications of the climate change is the anticipated coastal sea level rise, which may be due to the, of course, as I mentioned, the changes in the seasonal cycle and also various other factors. So the coastal sea level rise is something which is, of course, an important aspect for the coastal cities, because the urban infrastructure is not designed and they are not capable of adapting to any possibilities of coastal sea level rise in future. And the next one, please. Another this one that has been noticed, the impact of the climate change on the ecosystem. This is something that has been investigated, the warm temperature, speed of the metabolism of the process of for the animals. I'm not a biologist, I'm not very familiar with this, but at least most of you can probably see that there is the amphibians are aging, and so there is a concern in terms of the warmer temperatures impact on the ecosystem as a whole. May I have the next one, please? So the change, threatening this one is will impose increasing economic costs, and the climate change affects all sectors of the economy. impacts the industrial production, operation, supply chain, and disruption. So as we have seen recently with the recent floodings in BC, in British Columbia, our supply chain was completely cut off from the northwestern part of Canada to the eastern Canada of Canada, which caused a considerable economic disruption. And therefore, there is the one of the key things that we have to keep in mind is adapting to the climate change impacts, although they may be taking place in a regional and local scale, but eventually, of course, they will have some significant impact on the economic activities. Thank you. Next one, please. So we have seen, I will go through a little bit of the things that happened in closer to home in Canada, which we were completely taken aback because these type of events were mostly climatic, very seasonal, but this happened very suddenly, which was a concern to many of the people who observe and follow climate change initiatives in Canada. The first thing that I would like to address is in July of this year, we had a horrific heat wave, which we call a heat dome, claimed hundreds of lives and setting a record-breaking temperature of 49.6 degrees centigrade, which is never heard of in Canada. That's the highest temperature that has been ever recorded. And that was an eye-opener in terms of this one. This temperature, high dome, hot temperature domes persisted for several weeks in one of the locations, Linton, in interior BC, British Columbia. Then followed by that, I think in recent weeks or in the last 4 or 5 weeks, we had significant rainfall, exceeding 100 to 120 millimeters of rain for several days, which is essentially caused by a geostrophic or geophysical phenomenon, which is often observed but generally doesn't have a significant impact, what we call an atmospheric river, which is essentially a mass of river, a moisture-laden system which crosses from the Pacific Ocean, from the equatorial Pacific to the mainland BC, British Columbia, and saw nearly 300 millimeters of rain in just 2 days, and caused a havoc in many parts of the interior British Columbia. May I have the next one, please? And this is the effect of the heat dome. Wild forest fires, the temperature rised, as I said, 49.6 degrees centigrade, the highest recorded. And these are some of the scenes right in the interior of this one. And the area was completely devastated with estimated to be around $300 to $400 billion damage to the communities. Next one, please. I talked about this impact of this atmospheric rivers. I am not a large-scale geophysicist, but to the extent that I can understand what these atmospheric rivers do, we have the west coast of Canada is largely the climatic influences is from the Pacific Ocean, which is, as you know, the largest ocean. And the Pacific Ocean, the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean brings in a lot of moisture as it flows along the Pacific Ocean. And then it forms an unusual stream of a river, you may call it, which is several 100 kilometers wide, which generates pass into the coastline to the interior BC, British Columbia, And the British Columbian landscape, as you see it, is we have this range of mountains, something similar to the eastern and western Ghats. And as this cold, moisture-ridden river-like atmospheric flow hits this one, when there is temperature change as it impacts on the land mass, and as a consequence, of course, it generates this regional rainfall amounting to, as I mentioned to you, several hundred millimeters of rain over a period of time lasting from 24 hours to 72 hours. And as this had that impact on this, just very recently, in the last 4 or 5 weeks. The next one, please. So the is a large narrow stream. I explained to you by words, and you can read it afterwards. And cross from the ocean to the land, particularly the mountainous regions in British Columbia's coastal region. The vapor condenses, precipitation magnifies, dumping rain continuously for several long time, 24 hours or longer. Then next one, please. And you can see the rain distribution that is seen there. This is the Vancouver Island, which is an island which is west of the mainland. Then, of course, the Pacific Ocean is here. So you can see the rainfall. And this one with the 75 to 125 millimeters. The color code just shows the magnitude of the rainfall. Next one, please. This is what the result of it is. You could see what was say, very pristine, very fertile agricultural landscape was practically submerged because of this. And the system, it is not something that was anticipated. Therefore, there was no possibility of adaptation. And as a consequence, we were completely caught off guard. And although many lives were lost, loss of life was not significant, only a few lives were lost due to this one. There was a major effort, of course. We have an emergency, Canadian emergency, this one which came into action immediately. As a consequence, loss of life was minimized, but the economic devastation was significant. As I mentioned, estimated to be around 600 to 700 billion dollars. And the more important thing is the disruption that it caused because of the Trans-Canada Highway, which connects from Vancouver to the mainland, Eastern Canada, that is Montreal and Toronto, which is roughly about 5,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers. The complete rail line was completely destroyed, and as well as the road transport. And with the pandemic restrictions, the air transportation, this one also, the air is also disrupted. So there is a significant environmental impact for the entire country in terms of this flood damages that occurred in Abbotsville. That's the location that in the interior BC. May I have the next slide, please? So as we see that we always have this climate change dilemma, because we are trying to balance it out from on one hand, the growth and development for various human activities, and and then of course at the same time balancing the impact of the climate change. And it's this is something which has been discussed in both nationally, internationally, and then the conflict that arises between the developed countries and the developing countries. Developing countries insisting on continuing with the carbon to CO2 emissions for a while till they catch up with the developed countries. And this debate is something continuous and ever this one. So this dilemma is always there, faced with addressing climate change initiatives. Next slide, please. So the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26 in Glasgow, was essentially to review the Paris Agreement to minimize or to attain the net zero emission target, to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees centigrade, and essentially to take stock what the countries have done, and essentially to get a timetable on when each member nations will be able to attain that net zero emissions. There are several pledges. Canada has pledged to bring the net zero emissions to in 2050. So is the United States. And countries like China 2070, India, I think also has made some commitments towards that goal. So that was essentially to take stock of it. May I next one, please? So the next previous slide. So the overall goal of net zero emission is to ensure that greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere are no longer increasing. So nationally determined contributions, the European Union have submitted zero emission pledges. By net zero, they mean there will be still be greenhouse gas emissions, but the technologies and other initiatives that are taking place is to keep it so that the greenhouse gas emissions are limited to the limit where the natural carbon sink can absorb. So this is the type of concept. This one, I think, the pledge that the countries have given. They have to initiate measures, and both in terms of technology, adaptation of technologies, human behavior, and cutbacks, and all those things has to be done. So this is the one of the main objectives of the COP26 meeting in Glasgow. Next one, please. Just Canada's, I'll just go briefly with what we are doing here in Canada, the net zero emissions, remove as much greenhouse gases from the air as possible by 2050. Next one, please. There are 6 pathways. I don't have time to go through all of them, but as you can see here, so when you have time, you can read. So not only there are main focuses in terms of the net zero emissions. They have identified some of the major contributors, and that has to be this one. Of course, the cities, particularly in Canada and the United States, cities play a major role because the extreme climate that we are involved here. So some initiatives are centered around this one, which I will share with you now. Next one, please. So to get emissions down to 500 million tons, and the numbers I can see in the slide afterwards. So these are some of the initiatives that are undertaken. Canada is still a very advanced developed country, and of course we generate about 730 million tons of greenhouse emissions, and we are the 10th with a population of only 30 million people in a world of 3 billion, excess of 3 billion people. Of course, it is considerable amount of greenhouse gas emissions takes place, not only because of the extreme climatic conditions that we have in the northern latitudes, but also, of course, the advanced technology and industrial. This one. May I have the next one, please? And I will try to show how this 730 million tons is going to be brought down to zero. So decarbonizing the transport system, because the transport sector is one of the main contributors of the carbon dioxide or the greenhouse gas emissions. So decarbonizing the London transport. Of course, as many of you have read and heard, that London has been a global leader in this because they have taken several initiatives, not only in terms of introduction of electric vehicles, and providing rapid charging points in decarbonizing, a key part in decarbonizing the transport system, and shift to cleaner vehicles to help us make, because one of the concerns that we have in the introduction of the electric vehicles is the feasibility of providing charging, and there's an issue which concerns many people who are contemplating or embarking on changing into from traditional gasoline engines to electric vehicles, and this is one issue. May I have the next one, please? So cities have taken a center stage. I think it should be the case in all over the world in trying to bring the greenhouse gas emissions to net zero. This one, so that is one of the things that I'm going to share with you in what we have done in a city which I live very close to Toronto. May I have the next one, please? So what Canada has done, urban solutions, that the low carbon centers, we call it what we call the low carbon centers. There are several of them you can see here. We have the Greater Toronto area, Hamilton and area, which is roughly about 3 million people, 3 to 3.5 million, 1/10 of the country's population. Then you have the metropolitan community, then Ottawa, which is the capital of the country, Vancouver, which talked about another the industrial area, Edmonton, Calgary, and then there's a national office of a Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So the low carbon centers will advance solutions in three areas. One is energy efficiency buildings, because we use energy not only in the winter months to keep it warm, but also in the winter months with the temperatures going almost tropical numbers in the winter, in summer months. We also use considerable amount of electricity for air conditioning and other cooling purposes. Of course, every aspect of the urban life depends on energy consumption, not only transportation, house, buildings, living, every aspect, food, every aspect of human life depends on energy. So energy efficiency in buildings, urban renewable energy, possibility of renewable energy, and transportation solutions. So these are the things that the low carbon centers in these metropolitan areas supposed to advance. May I have the next one, please? Give me a signal when I am close to 5 minutes. Net zero by 2040, Toronto's accelerated climate strategy, which I'm going to address only of the Toronto region. Greenhouse gases to net zero by in 10 years' time. Because although Canada has made a pledge to bring net zero in 2050, some of the metropolitan areas are taken an accelerated phase to see that we make that commitment by 2040 in Toronto. Some of these strategies are already there in the slide that you can read it up later. Thank you. Next one. Other initiative that the Glasgow Declaration was the forestation, global forestation. Canada was one of the signatories, along with Brazil, Russia, Colombia, and Indonesia, and also Republic of Congo. To collectively, they have 85% of the world's forest, and have committed to this one. So there is this reversing the global deforestation, because net zero emission is a two-way street, is double-edged sword. Because if you encourage global deforestation, to that extent, of course, the carbon sink also is compromised. So this was another initiative that was brought about. Next one, please. So by 2030, Canada's forest sector will remove so many megatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere every year. Next one, please. So I mentioned to you, I showed you before what the emissions are in Canada. It is 730 million tons. And you see the chronology that is given there. I have to tell you very honestly, they will meet it in spite of the fact, in spite of Canada making that pledge this year, the carbon emissions have gone up, which is something which was for various reasons. So the timetable that is given here, this is purely for some various sectors: electricity generation, oil and gas consumption, buildings, transportation, heavy industry, agriculture, waste and other industries. The chronology is, I think you cannot see, is to bring by 2050 to net zero emissions. This is the target. And there is every reason to believe, with the initiatives that are taken by the Canadian government as well as by the regional governments in various provinces, this target will certainly be met by 2050. Next one, please. Well, thank you. I think thank you for providing me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts.
Thank you, Professor Murthy.
Thank you, Dr.
Are there any questions?
Sir, may I ask, sir? This
Yes.
is Ramesh. Sir, thank you very much, sir, for this elaborate presentation. I am having 3 questions, sir. Am I audible,
Can
sir?
you switch on your video and speak?
Hello. Sir.
Hello.
Sir, there is a front. Is my audio is okay, sir? Hello.
Hello.
Sir, is my audio is okay?
One second. I think he's adjusting the audio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The professor, is my audio is okay, sir?
Yeah, your audio
Hello?
is okay. Please go ahead.
Go
Sir,
ahead.
yeah, the question is, sir, you have given a road ahead map for going to the net zero by 2050. So in the last slide, you have shown that there will be a reduction, the plan of reduction of the oil and gas by 92%, or to the maybe 8% reduction to the existing levels. So what was the plan of the Canadian government to replace the existing fossil fuels?
Can you repeat again? Once again?
So in the last slide, you have shown that for the net zero target of 2050, you have shown that various kind of these pollutant carbon emitting sectors, there should be a reduction. So in that, in the bottom line, you have shown that there is a target of reduction in the terms of using the oil and gas also.
Oh,
what
okay.
was the Canadian plan of action to reduce that fossil fuel, particularly oil and gas?
Yeah, I understand now. One of the things I cannot, this one is of course, there is a public education campaign on commuting and providing mass transit and all those type of initiatives to reduce the transportation, to decarbonize the transportation sector. Another initiative Canadian government has done, which is controversial, but it has been in this one, is imposing this carbon tax. The more gas you use, the more tax you pay. So, which an economic penalty. Probably Canada is the first country to introduce that one about 3-4 years ago. So there are several initiatives that are done to reduce this. In fact, for example, the residents that I live in here, we got a substantial package for remodel to reduce the consumption of gas for heating purposes. So there are many initiatives, both nationally as well as regionally and locally, and they keep on bringing these things to be what you generally call a carrot and stick. The carrot is dangling, providing the tax advantages. The stick is penalizing with the tax, like the carbon tax.
Which kind of energy resources are majorly using or majorly producing in Canada, and which energy resources are major contribution to carbon emission?
Canada is one of the rich in terms of hydrocarbons, both natural gas as well as crude oil. Alberta is actually a province which is completely a lot of oil in underground in this one. So, and also in the offshore oil in in the offshore of Newfoundland in the east coast.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. On the last question, sir, the advanced countries like US, am I audible, sir? The advanced countries like US, when the governments are changing, they are changing the policies towards the climate change. For example, when the these Republican government is there in the power, Donald Trump, he withdrew from the US this Paris Climate Agreement. Thereafter, after changing the government again, the Democrats are taking the initiative to rejoin into the Paris Climate Agreement. When a major contributors towards this climate, major pollutants, causers who are contributors to this climate change, they themselves are behaving like this, and how underdeveloped countries can take steps to towards climate change.
I do understand this kind of transitions always takes place. That was only an aberration in the US as a consequence of opting out of the Paris Agreement during the Trump administration when the Republicans came to power. But they're back into this one. Of course, sincerely speaking, I can say that in their own best interest, I'm not saying that that they're quite sincere in their effort. There is always a population which, even in Canada, we have a conservative party, which is the opposition, which is similar to Republicans, they're more conservative in their approach philosophically as well as politically. But by and large, the mainstream activities related to climate change in a long term is not going to be hampered that much because of these disturbances. That happens even in India also, because the debate that I hear in most of the developing countries is mostly arguing about we have to catch up, and therefore we have to burn, we have to use coal. You remember the COP26, instead of eliminating consumption of coal by 20, or no, I forget the date, they brought it down to phase out. No, this kind of compromises takes place. I mean, there is a genuine interest in this, because it's all in the interest of everybody, because this climate change is no longer simply as people used to call it, a hoax. It is real. It is real. It is there in your doorstep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. One add-on is that I hear from one environmentalist that in the Western countries, these Republican ideologists, people, those who are having that philosophy, that they don't believe in the climate change at all. Is that correct argument, sir? That
there is a small percentage of people who are mostly well versed with this rapid economic growth, and there is also certain element of what shall I call a political ideology that at all cost economic development must continue, whatever may be the implications to the environment, whatever may be the implications to the climate change, as long as they can keep on producing, it is there. They're mostly the business operatives, and the former president Trump is an industrialist, entrepreneur, and so that's those type of people are there everywhere in the world. Maybe a little bit more in US, which is more dominant, but It's there in Canada too. It is there in US. It is there in Europe. I'm sure there is there in India also, but
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. I think I might be taking more time. If I allowed, I will ask one last question. Sorry.
No, Ramesh, I think other people also should have a chance to
Okay, sorry.
interact with Professor Rajmurthy.
Okay,
There
sir.
are
Thank
some
you, sir.
youngsters, they are keen to interact with him.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, thank you so much.
Sir, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
okay.
Yeah, hi, sir. This is Shompi. I'm from Bangalore. I have a question at a very human level. If
Go ahead.
Canada is preparing for a net zero by 2050, hello?
Yeah,
Yes,
continue.
yes. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm supposed to start my video.
I'm hearing. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, if that is what is expected, Canada is preparing, right? And Canada is also right now taking a lot of immigrants from other countries. So as the population grows, obviously there will be a lot of burden on the infrastructure, on the natural resources. So at that level, how is Canada preparing to deal with it? Because either they plan it in a manner that this entire country becomes planned, like for instance, a Navi Mumbai or a Chandigarh, or they have whatever infrastructure they have, and once people start coming to their country, they build the nation again.
Well, I think as I showed you this extreme climatic events that took place in the western part of Canada, in the British Columbia, one of the priorities that has been, at least in the immediate future, is the adaptation. How well the infrastructure, both in the urban infrastructure as well as the large-scale urban infrastructure, such as the transportation systems, the railway, and all those type of things, can manage due to catastrophic climatic events which may occur unnoticed at any time. And that has already begun. And in terms of an adaptation to the climate change initiatives, both at the local level, or even in fact at the individual level, and the local level, regional level, the policies have been fairly consistent, as I have seen it in the last 10 years. They have not changed very much. But, you know, as a free country, like any other democratic country, there are ups and downs. Sometimes you may not be able to go through every one of them, but by and large, I have seen, just give an example, our gas consumption 10 years ago was at least 25% more than what we do now. To keep the same level of comfort with various technological innovations in terms of keeping the temperature in the house at night when you go to bed at a somewhat cooler, and then as soon as you get up by 6 o'clock, the house warms up a few degrees more. And similarly, in terms of the various other transportation sector, they have done a quite considerable this one, including renewable energy projects. I didn't have time to talk about. They have been exploring quite vigorously in terms of, they already had a test plant in the tidal power in the Bay of Fundy in east coast of Canada, which is one of the highest tidal range in the world. And so they have done quite well, I should say. I mean, without any reservations.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then we'll thank Professor Rajmurthy for sparing few minutes with us. So now, Professor Murthy, there's another youngster will do the presentation. Please be around for another 10-15 minutes, okay?
Okay.
Prasanna will do the presentation. He will
Okay,
talk about sacred forests in India,
Okay.
especially the Shimoga district, okay?
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. I will tell.
Yeah, Prasanna?
Hello, sir. Can I present after Prasanna, ma'am?
No, Prasanna will do that. Okay, yours is tomorrow. Because Avani has asked me not to go beyond 7:30.
No, sir, not at all, sir. Up to your discretion, sir. We are here.
So I'm
will
also
be short.
supposed to present today.
Okay, Prasanna, please
Sir,
continue.
am I
Yeah, your
well,
slides are
sir? And my
visible.
screen is
Yeah, yeah.
good evening, everyone. Try